What I want to do now is move us away from a kind of philosophical question and start asking very direct questions. Okay, what are journalists for? We've been talking about where journalists fit in society, but we also want to talk about to whom they should be speaking, and we also want to talk more specifically about what they should be speaking about. And right now I'm going to offer you my opinion. This is one of those times where I tell you what I think, not surveying what a bunch of other people have thought. When I think about what journalists are for, I think about their role in a democratic society, I think about who they should be speaking to, and I think about what are the key issues on which they should be focused. Because it's a big wide world out there, and journalists can write about, photograph, create video about a whole lot of different subjects. And when I think about what's important in the world, where journalists should focus their attention, I think of two things. One is justice. This will mirror some things I said earlier in the semester. But one grouping of issues that I think are crucial, that journalists should be thinking about, I would put under the heading of justice. We've talked about how the distribution of wealth and power in the world today is unjust. If by justice we mean some distribution of wealth and power that allows people to live at least a minimally decent life. The distribution of wealth in the world today does not make that possible. Therefore, my conclusion is the distribution of wealth and power in the world today is unjust. That distribution of wealth and power makes it impossible for about at least half the world's population to live what we might call a minimally decent life. So the question under this heading of justice that I'm arguing should animate journalists is, how can we create a just distribution of wealth and power that recognizes the inherent dignity of all people? Right, so I'm taking as a touchstone a common moral argument that all people, all human beings on this planet, all 7 billion of us, are born with dignity. That dignity is inherent in being human. That my moral standing is no different than the moral standing of every one of those other nearly 7 billion people in the world. That is an assertion that I'm making, but I don't think it's a terribly controversial assertion, because I think that concept, that people are born with an inherent dignity, I think that's central to every theological and philosophical system you can imagine. I do not know of an ethical system that does not rest on that premise. Right? Wherever you come from, and you all come from lots of different places, some of you come from a religious background, some from a secular, different kinds of religions, different kinds of secular philosophy, but I would argue that everyone in the room believes that all human beings are come into the world with equal moral standing. There is an inherent dignity. If you don't believe that, I don't know that I want to hear, because I can't imagine what the alternative would be. Okay. Right. So if, in fact, the distribution of wealth and power that exists today makes it impossible for a significant portion of the human population to live out that dignity, then it seems to me we have a problem. Now, how people would understand that problem and how people would address the problem will vary widely. But I think one of the ways to think about the issues that should be of importance to journalism is to focus on the question of justice. I think at that level it's not a controversial statement, but this is the first day of class. We are living at a time when, if you evaluate the data on the health of the ecosphere, the living world in which we are a part and on which our own lives depend, if you look at all that data about biodiversity, the loss of species, data about climate change, data about dwindling energy supplies, data about groundwater contamination, data about topsoil loss, data about the growing size of dead zones in the ocean. Look at it all, folks. It ain't pretty. And what it suggests is that the systems in which we live are not sustainable. And that seems to me to be an issue that should be front and center for journalists alongside of justice. The question I formulate is, how can we create a sustainable system to meet human needs without undermining the ecosystem's capacity to support life into the future? Right? How do we create a system in which we get what we need to survive, to thrive, yet we don't compromise the ability of future generations to survive and thrive as well? There will be people with different opinions about this. Some people will say that technology will provide the answers to solve these problems. I'm skeptical. Some people say that we'll simply discover new energy sources to deal with the problem of dwindling sources. I'm skeptical. I think we're going to have to look at much more profound and fundamental changes. And I would put those under the heading of sustainability. So if people ask me, what are journalists for? We start with a general sense of the role of journalism in a democratic society. Journalists are claiming special status, claiming to do something that's important to democracy in a modern, complex society, providing that information needed, maybe with a focus on challenging the centers of power. They're going to ask questions about the intended audience of that. People who tend to come out of a popular conception of democracy are going to say the most important people that journalists should be reaching are ordinary people to help them take control of their own lives. And then finally, what are the issues on which journalists should be focused? Here you'll find all sorts of opinions. I'm simply offering you two general headings that seem to me to capture those issues and those problems that are most crucial. One is justice within the human family, right? That distribution of wealth and power within human communities. The other is the relationship of the human community to the larger world, since we are dependent on that larger world for our own lives. And I think if you take those two questions of justice and sustainability, you'll find that, from my point of view, most of the crucial issues we face can be organized under those two questions. And of course, those two questions are often very connected. Right. So this was a class period to get you thinking about journalism, where it fits in the world and where you fit within it.